So when comes up to the first mistake we made. So when we first released it, we thought it would just be a way to promote our game, so we just stick it up there. We didn't know what would really happen, but when we saw all these people playing it, we thought maybe a sponsor would want to sponsor our game, a portal, and to get all that traffic for themselves. So we asked a few sponsors, sent a bunch of emails off to sponsor portals, and we got most of them ignored us, but we got a useful response out of Congregate, which was basically said, maybe if you'd asked us last week. So basically, most Flash games have a very short, very big peak, and then they go flat very quickly because there's so many Flash games coming out, people move on to another one. And so they're really not interested in a game unless it's only been seen by a few hundred people. So they basically said, no thanks. So that was the first mistake we learnt, and this is what our traffic did look like. So we got that huge peak, and then it basically died off quite a lot. So something else we found out about was Flash game license. So they're a bunch of people, you give them your game and then they put it up and then they try to sell it to a bunch of sponsors for you, and there's auction type process and they try to find a sponsor for you. So we went to them, tried to get them to promote the game for us. So this is when we found out our second big mistake. So initially we figured that people the sponsors would just buy games so that they'd be on their website and people would go to their website to play the game. But it turns out that although there are some big portals like Congregate, Newgrounds and Armour Games, they don't actually, they've got lots of players, but they don't actually dominate the industry. There's thousands of smaller portals of various sizes, and so as far as the percentage of audience goes, these big portals don't have it all. So the reason they sponsor games is that you'll spread it out to lots of portals, and what happens is if your game appears on big portals, then the small portals will see it there and copy it, put it on their portal, and so your game will spread virally to all of the portals. And then by having the sponsor in there, you have a link in the game to point back to the sponsor's site. So the people will play your game on wherever they've played it, go back to the sponsor's site and play more games there, see ads on the sponsor's site. So that's why the sponsors want a game. So the problem with that, why that was a mistake for us, is because we were using Google Maps. The Google Maps API is locked to a specific domain, so our game can't spread around portals. So it's like, oh, crap. So basically, Flash Game License sort of taught us that lesson. So they weren't able to find any sponsors for us, but that was sad for that. So the next mistake we made was saying, yeah, we'll release the zombie sim, and then 1 week later release the game. That was, in hindsight, a stupid idea. So we got caught up in the excitement around ZOS and then the simulator, and then this was at the end of November, so we were just moving into Christmas, which is a bad time for me because I've got family, and 2 birthdays around that time as well, my wife and my daughter. So there's no chance we're going to get anything done quickly anyway. So during that time, we discussed how we could maybe modify the game so that we could sell it to sponsors. So the thought we had was, could we embed that Google imagery into the game? And it's illegal to excuse me, to steal Google's imagery, but you can buy aerial photography from the suppliers. So we were considering that, but the problem is that Washington map that game was based on, it's a 1 kilometre area, which is about 8,000 by 8,000 pixels, which is about 15 megabytes when compressed, and that would be too big for a Flash game. Flash games need to be probably under 5 meg, but at the maximum under 10 meg. So if we put all that in there, it just would have been too big. So what we thought we'd do instead is put a second map in. We found a map supplier in the UK who sold maps relatively cheaply, so we did a smaller 500 by 500 metre map in the UK, and so that's why our start game screen has a choice of 2 maps. And we embedded the imagery for this one into the game, so that worked out about 2.5 meg compressed, and that made the whole game about 7 megabytes, so still sponsorable. And our plan was that when this was played on any, we'd put in the Google API key for the sponsor's site, so people would have to go to the sponsor's site to play that second map. And when the game was played on any other site, it would say, go back to the sponsor's site. So there'd be another way to drive traffic back to the sponsor. The next problem we had, so then we were, I think it was about February this year, we were ready to, we started doing some beta testing with the fans from the first version, and we emailed a bunch of sponsors again. So this time we went directly to sponsors again, not through Flash Game License, because the thing with Flash Game License is they take a 10% commission, so we thought we'll just go direct to sponsors again. And again, most of them ignored us, and again we got a response from Congregate, but not a good one. And basically they said is that it was too boring. So they said they liked the simulator, but they found the game itself was a bit too slow and boring. And the thing is that most Flash gamers have a very short attention span. You need to hook them within about a minute, maybe 2 minutes at the most. Otherwise, they're just going to go and play any of the 100 other Flash games that are constantly coming out. And so that was pretty disappointing because there are lots of other Flash games being sponsored that we could see that were obviously a lot simpler than ours, but I think complexity doesn't necessarily make a better game. So that was the next mistake we made. So then we went back to a Flash game license. And these guys, I highly recommend them. I mean, all the sponsors ignored us, for one thing. But these guys know the sponsors. They know which sponsors are currently buying. They know what sort of games they're looking for. So this is the auction that we sort of had going on for bids for our game. And FGL as well, when we had a bit of a slow start, and they hassled some more sponsors for us. So we got all these bids, but in the end we decided not to take any of them. And mostly that was because we thought the game might do even better than the simulator had, and we might make roughly that amount of money just from ads. The next issue is another mistake we made as to why we didn't accept some of those bids was that our game was too big. So initially when we did it, we made it 800 by 600 pixels because we thought that was a good size for playing the game. But we found out that although most of the major portals support that size, a lot of the other ones only have a maximum width of 700 or 650 pixels wide, and especially the ones that put their games on Facebook. And so sponsors will rarely sponsor a game that's that big. And so those, I think the first and third top bids, the 4,000 and 5,000, hadn't noticed that our game was that wide, and when we asked them about it, they said, oh yeah, can you make it any smaller? And so we tried it at a smaller size and it just looked awful, so we figured we wouldn't go with that. So we figured, okay, we'll self-publish again. So we put in lots of ads again. So again, Google Ads, they just show random stuff. We put an ad here on the main menu and an ad, when the scientists appear, you get a news flash, and so we put an ad there as well. So initially we just put it up on our own site because we figured we wanted the maximum sort of revenue from the Google Ads on our site if the game got dug again. So we put it on our site, we promoted it. By then we had about 2,000 Facebook fans from the simulator. So we promoted it to them, promoted it to our forum and our mailing list, and just emailed random zombie sites and stuff like that. So we had a bit of a peak of about 5,000 plays, and then it died off pretty quickly. And so then we thought, okay, we'll start promoting it or distributing it wider. And so we put it on Congregate, Newgrounds. We use Flash Game Distribution, which is a service related to Flash Game License, and basically you upload your game to them and they spread it out to a whole bunch of portals. So we did that. We emailed people and see if they could put it on their site. And then later on we also use Mochi Distribution, which is another service that just basically pushes your game out there. And so all of that got the traffic going reasonably well. So as far as earning money from ads, so ad networks like Google and Mochi, they basically sell ads. Got 1 minute, do I? Okay. I'll try to go fast. They sell ads on a cost per view or a cost per click basis. But what you end up getting paid, or the metric is the effective cost per 1,000 plays. And so you can expect anywhere from a few cents up to maybe tens of cents or $1 or $2 per 1,000 plays, which is not a great deal. And one thing to also note is that Congregate don't allow any ads on their site, but they pay you a share of their revenue. So this here is probably the most interesting slide, how much money we made. So we've earned total about $3,000. We spent about $2,000 on stuff like our domain, our hosting and stuff like that. Initially we had quite an expensive dedicated server, and that was even that was falling over when we got dug, just in case we got dug, but it still wasn't enough. So we made about $1,000 of profit, which we put about 500 hours each into it, so it's $1 an hour. Not exactly the best way to make money, but it was fun. And another thing to note is that with, say, watching Google and Congregate, usually there's a limit that you have to reach, and then they'll pay you. You have to wait till the end of the month and another month. So even though we released initially in November, it wasn't until January that we actually started getting paid. So this is a breakdown of the money. So most of our income has come from Google, even though only 2/3 of our views have actually been on our own site where the Google ads are. We put a link on our game for donations, and that's given us almost nothing. So I don't know if that's because people think they've watched enough ads, they don't deserve to give us any more money. Another thing that Flash Games really is valuable in doing Flash Game development is put metrics in your game. So I'll just briefly, there's MochiBot, Google Analytics, and Mochi Analytics can tell you some stuff. So here, this particular plot, it's not easy to read, but this is how long people spend playing your game. So this is the 1 to 3 minutes. So 30 seconds to 1 minute. So you can see that most people have dropped off by the time it gets to here. And our game probably takes about 15 minutes to play. So a lot of people aren't even getting that far. So you can see how you really got to grab people's attention. As well as ads and analytics, Mochi also do free hosting of your game, which is great. Another thing they do is a service called Live Updates, where once your game is spread everywhere, you can't update it if you want to make a bug fix or put something else in there. But what they do is you upload your game to them, and then they give you a version of it which is wrapped in something which will then check their servers if there's a newer version of the game. So that's really helpful if you want to be able to update your game. So even though Flash sponsorship didn't work for us, we decided not to do it. It can work. So I recently read this article on Gama Sutra about this game called Steambirds, and they managed to get a sponsorship deal for 25 grand, and their game was played about 3.5 million times in the first month. So games that are very popular, I mean, our game made 1 million, which seems like a lot, and it's good, but it's not great. The best games make probably tens of millions of plays. What was I going to say about... the problem with ads is that advertisers don't pay much to advertise to gamers, and then there's all these people in the middle who take a cut, like the ad networks and the portals and all that, before you actually get any of the money. So recently there's been a push to making premium Flash games. There's a great article by Colm Larkin talking about that, and one option is to just have a free game and then charge for some money to get an advanced version, or another option is microtransactions, where you might charge 10 cents or something like that to upgrade something within the game. So these are just some examples from that article. So this is Fantastic Contraption. They charge $10 for an editor, and they've achieved about $50 average per 1,000 players is their revenue, so that's a lot better than, say, the $1 or $2 that you might get from ads alone. And this is SAS Zombie Assault 2, which is a game they charge you, small amounts, microtransactions for upgrading weapons and things like that, and they've managed about $5 or $10 per 1,000 players, so you can definitely make better money that way. And basically is, if you get millions of players, it can add up. So the future, what we're doing now is we're building a thing where people can basically play this zombie game anywhere in the world they like. So they pick somewhere in the world, zoom in. So over here I've got Liberty Island, Statue of Liberty is, and then colour in where all the walls and cars and stuff are, and then it'll appear as a marker on the map, and they can go and play and share that with their friends. So that's something we're building. So we're basically, although we made all those mistakes around traditional sort of Flash publishing, we've decided to embrace all of them and do it all on our own website and stuff like that, and have a game, miles too wide for any portal in the world. And see, we'll see how that goes. So that was it. So yeah, I guess there'll be questions after Matt's talk, but if you don't get to ask me a question, feel free to send me an email or whatever.